Everyone, today we are going to be doing some live streaming, some Trainz route building on my Milton Valley Railroad, which is a fictional railroad set in sort of the 1950s, so early to mid diesel era, so I guess that'd be 1950s, 60s-ish, in sort of the northeastern states. So kind of West Pennsylvania, and yeah, just be doing some route building. This is what I've already made. It is basically a palette, list of assets that I'll be using for this route, mostly, so the grass textures and forests and tracks and those kind of things. So let's just get started. I'll add a baseboard here, and with this I'm using the 5-meter grid size. So what I'm thinking here is that the railway is coming up this incline, so if you look at it from the side you can see that it's going from the right uphill to the left, and maybe there's a riverbed down here somewhere, and then we'll have a junction over here, or maybe a bit further down track where the railway splits up. One is going straight, the other is going to the right and up the hillside. Okay, so since I want the track to continue to go uphill at a particular elevation, grade, let's just see what grade I'm using. Here it's 0.5%, so let's continue with that. So I'll just lay the track with that grade selected, which, if you didn't know, lays the track with that grade. And apparently this wasn't straightened. Much better. Pardon me. I'm just looking at this now, and I'm realizing that when the track is going along the hillside here, it comes over here and then there's this kind of gap. Might look good to have a bridge coming over here and then have the junction just after the bridge. Might look interesting. So let's work on the hillside a bit. Pardon me. And yeah, I'm just putting the hillside up to meet the tracks, as you can see. Yeah, okay, so I'm just adding the end bit that I'd like the bridge to attach to, and I need the start bit as well, of course, which we'll put about there. And then I'm thinking a type of girder bridge maybe, or beam bridge, so I'll try searching for that. And by the way, if you're wondering why I've put the no payware filter on, it's because this route is going to most likely be put up as payware at some point, so I don't want to use assets that are already payware assets, because obviously I can't use those, because, well, then people would be buying them from my route, not from the other route where they're supposed to be bought from. Maybe. This one looks better. I do like this one as well, but with this one, because when making this decision, I'm picturing the way this is going to look when the scenery is already finished, and you put the camera down here and you look up at a train crossing the bridge, and with this bridge you'd only be able to see about half of the train height, whereas with this bridge you'd be able to see all the trucks as well, so the wheels and things. So I think this one's much better. Let's see what's end piece. Ah, I see. It's an end piece, surprisingly. So let's see, what I'll do is I'll put the end piece spline first, and then set it to the right height, and then I'll see if maybe I can insert the other spline into that. That might make it a bit easier to keep the same gradient without changing the gradient before. Oh, and it allows straightening, that's even better. Okay. And for this I'll actually remove the gradient value, set it back to 0, which means that tracks will no longer be placed with a gradient in place. Oh, wrong one selected still. Now which one is straightened? Ah, neither of them. So I'll straighten both these. Then I need to replace this bit with the same sort of thing, but only going the other way, so that the guardrails in the middle actually end. Oh, I see, because this bit's... is it straightened? I wonder why there's that kink in the track. That's better, I think. Yes. Sorry. And let's see if we have support. No, this is for a signal to be placed on the side of a girder bridge. But in this case, because, well, we're going to have the junction diverging off to the right, which means that because it's single track, you can't have signals that are facing each other along the same piece of track, because otherwise a train could come this way, stopping at this red signal, another train could come this way, wanting to go that way, stopping at a red signal. Before the junction, they'd block each other. So you can have signals coming from this way and this way, but not from this way, because the train going here would need to stop before to allow either of these trains to pass first. Sorry. Let's search for support. 1 second. There we go. Okay. I mean, it's a bit broad. Now. I mean, maybe, but doesn't really fit with the color scheme. This one looks much better. So let's see. If we made this valley a bit deeper on this end. Oh, I see. I thought, oh, because I deleted the piece it was attached to, it didn't actually keep the vertex height. Okay, I am just trying to see how many supports this bridge might need. Wrong support tab. This one. Let's see. Does that look reasonable? Maybe if we move these over a bit. Maybe something like that. Maybe we need 3. So if we placed one roughly in the middle, a bit more to the left, and then we placed 2 here. Yeah, I think it needs 3. Yeah, looks okay. So now I'll try to align the terrain to the track and see if it makes any cuts or any big fills. I'm just imagining what it would look like driving along here. Well, that looks good. Maybe we could have a creek coming from up here or something like that. We might not actually have water, but we could use some darker grass tones around the sides, or maybe gravel, to indicate that there's sometimes when there's more rainfall, maybe a creek or a river comes down here. Okay, so now I'll save, and then I'll add another baseboard. Okay, so before I'm going to add the hill, I've just remembered that I wanted the junction to go right, which might be better if I added the junction first to see how the grades will be, and then added the hills after. See here. Now, do I want this junction to be on a grade? Or do we want the grade to pick up after the junction? I think it's going to be some interesting driving if the junction itself is on a grade. So, okay, so if we take this point to be the point where the junction begins, let's keep the grade from before. I'll add the straight piece of track, which is going to be the non-diverging one. You know, I'll place it again, so just so that it keeps the gradient, because if I place it and then move it backwards or forwards, then the gradient obviously becomes sharper or shallower. Place it like that, and then I'll place the diverging track maybe maybe this sort of an angle. We straighten this. Let's see, what is the radius of this curve? Okay, well that's 270 degrees. Okay, well that's not too steep. Yeah, you always get a bit of sea fighting with junctions. Okay, so since this is going uphill, I'm going to need to increase the grade, so maybe increase it by 1%. So let's try 1.5. And let's see how we could build this up. So let's see. I was thinking maybe we could have kind of a cutting up there that could maybe lead to a bit of a valley or canyon through which the track could snake up. Not sure how that will look with having the creek here already, but this is quite shallow, so maybe it will look okay. So if I have it over here, although if it's a cutting, then we could maybe even increase the grade, because it's only a short distance, maybe let's say 2 degrees. So about there maybe. I'm going straight like that, and we'll likely have the cutting around here, maybe in the curve actually, and then we'll go back to maybe 1%. Okay. And as for this track, let's just continue at 0.5%. Maybe have the valley curve a bit more to the left here. And we do need to add a straight piece here so that the curve will look right when we're doing the terrain editing. Okay, let's save again. Sorry. And because I want a cutting here, I'm going to move the terrain up deliberately to how it looked before the cutting was made, so that when I align the terrain down, the terrain will look more natural either side of the cutting, so that it looks like an actual cutting. In case you're wondering why the track sometimes disappears when I zoom out, that's just the lodding level of the track. So lodding is level of detail. So when you zoom out far enough, then the level of detail of some assets will go down so that it doesn't take as much processing power sorry, to render them. And in the case of this track, the last level of detail is just the track disappearing, which is why when I look at it like this, it looks like there is no track here until I zoom back in. But if we're driving along this route with the ballast underneath, as you can see over here, you can kind of see where the track is going to go, even if the actual asset disappears in the distance. And here I'm going to try to flatten this area of the junction out a bit, because I want to be able to see, so if the player's coming down here, then I want there to be another train stopped on the diverging track waiting for this one to pass, and I want the player to be able to see what cars he's got behind him. So I'll have this flat and devoid of trees, So yeah. And we need to have a bit of a slope going up this way, so that it makes sense that the junction would have been placed here for the track to go along this valley, if we have a valley continuing this way. Okay, so now I'll align the terrain, see what it looks like. Yeah, this looks okay. Just curving along the side of the hill. And by the way, because these two tracks were placed using the same gradient and I didn't move the spline points, that means that they are on the same level. So if you did it a different method, then one track would usually go up a slightly different gradient than the other, in which case the tracks wouldn't be on the same level where they intersect, and they would one would be on top of the other, kind of. So we don't have this problem here because the way we did it. Sorry. Yeah, this cut is too long. I kind of wanted the valley to begin around here, kind of, like this, perhaps. From this side, maybe a bit later. So if we smooth it out like this, there's a bit more smoothing over here. And also up the terrain here to be more on the level of the tracks. And then align the terrain again. Sorry. We still need to lower it a bit over here. Let's see. I mean, that hillside looks okay, but I imagine that in the winter you'd get a lot of snowfall coming down here, but maybe it'll look different with the trees. I'll align the terrain again to see what it looks like now. Yeah, I'm happy with it. Only, as you can see, the cutting that Trainz has made is very sharp, so you can see the zigzag pattern of the terrain grid as it's been cut. So I'll try to fix that by very gently smoothing the terrain down either side with a smaller radius to kind of make the slopes a bit less steep, which will then also help with the zigzag effect. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I think that looks okay. We, of course, would need to paint this with a rock texture of some sort. Okay, so let's imagine this. Okay, so we're driving along here, going along here, crossing the bridge. Let's say we're going right, we're diverging, going through here, uphill, and this is the steep bit, if you remember, and then it levels off a bit more. And you can actually see this if you look at it from a low perspective, you can see that the tracks dip down as it enters the cutting. And now as for this bit, let's see. There should be kind of a depression in the ground from where the river is, or sometimes is. So if this goes up here, and then kind of in through here, then we need a reason why the river flows down and over here and not just straight down the side. So the reason obviously are hills. So let's just add some hills either side to make it a bit steeper. On this side as well. And we'll slowly already start raising up the terrain back here to prepare for the more mountainous terrain ahead. Maybe a bit steeper here. And a little less here. Because as you can see, these hills from down here kind of cover up the peaks behind them. So we need to lower these a bit so that from the bottom you're actually able to see the full slope, because otherwise it's just behind the hill. Sorry. Just checking to see if it's already too dark for the face cam, but it still looks okay. I'll turn the light on when it gets a bit darker. Okay, now can we imagine a river coming down here? I think yes. Sorry. Now the road also comes along here. So the road goes along like this. Then we're going to need a road bridge to cut across here. So maybe have the road bridge go from about here to maybe there. Maybe we could have a curve in the river that's in the valley. Make it go like this, perhaps. Now let's see, we have these yarnish bridges This one maybe. Yeah. Okay. Now okay, now we have to kind of decide what the river's water level is going to be at, which in this case is going to be the sea level. I don't know if we'll actually make the river go into the sea, but this will kind of be the level it's at if we do decide to eventually make the railroad follow the river all the way to the sea, which we probably won't, but still we should decide. So I think maybe have sea level be at -5 meters. So if I paint along here, adding water, and then I make a depression. Let's see how far down that is. Okay, that's kind of the level that it's going to be at. Yeah, I think that looks okay. So let's flatten this bottom out a bit, because this is just the water that's flowing in from the river into this creek that's coming in from up here. So we'll have it narrowed down a bit as it carries on. And we'll probably lose all the water before we even get to the railroad bridge, so we'll just have a dip where the water was. And then continue the dip up here, just to make it a bit clearer from the terrain where the water flows sometimes. Yeah, that looks okay. Maybe make this a bit flatter. Then we need to emphasize the dip a bit more. Okay. So I'm happy with the terrain, roughly, the way it is now. We'll have to change some things down here when we add the things that are the baseballs on the other side of the valley, and we'll add the river. But for now, I think that's okay. So now let's add the textures. So first I'll add the base grass. And then I'll actually place the forest. Sorry. And then I'll draw the forest texture underneath the forest later. So if you, as you can see, if I have two sort of types of forest. On the left is the more detailed, denser kind of forest that's right beside the tracks, and that goes to sort of about here. And then on the other side of that is the less dense kind, which is more in the distance. I mean, here you can see the divide going along here quite easily, but if you look at it at an angle, you really can't tell, and you're saving a lot of performance by having less objects. So I'll start with placing the close forest, obviously. Actually, no, I placed an area up here, which I could copy from, that would not have any assets already deleted or missing from where it was placed on the route. Sorry. I only want to copy the objects, and then I'll just paste this along here, and it's okay if it kind of overlaps the tracks at some point, because we'll need to delete these objects anyway that are near the track, and this way you just don't get these hard edges from copying. or rather pasting. Okay. And here it should be either side of the track, also going up on the ridge a bit. And then let's have the forest line going about here, and then going up like this. I'm kind of imagining this area down here. Maybe have the... Well, the thing is, it would look good if there's wooded area down to the base of the hills, but if you're on a train here and you're looking out, it would be nice to have this view of the valley. Pardon me. And if there are trees in the way, then you wouldn't have that. So I think I might leave it unforested at the moment, and maybe add trees later as we go along. Just add a bit more there. And now we'll add the background forest. So just select a quite big area of this. Then we'll paste this, trying to get as little, well, actually not as little, trying to get as much of the dense forest overwritten with this one that we can get away with. Because, for example, over here, since there's this tall slope, you really can't see that far up. So if we override it all the way to here with the less dense forest, then that works quite well. So we can shave off another area of dense forest. Yeah, well, I'll paste another little area down here. Or we could have a clearing, but sorry, but it might look better for us. I'll take care of that later. So now just covering this area. And I will go all the way through the riverbed, simply because it's easier to remove the trees later when the textures have already been placed. And I'll save again. And yes, I do save a lot, but it's really worth it, because it has happened to me in the past many times that I thought I saved quite a lot, and then Trainz crashed, and as it turned out, quite a few hours of work were gone. So yeah, I do advise saving as often as you can. So now I'll start removing the trees that are too close to the track. I'll move these shrubs a bit back, because I do quite like where they are, but they are a bit too close. Let's see, maybe I can have a few trees on that side. Is that too close? No, that looks okay. Or maybe a bit further away, like... one second, I want to get a big tree like this. Sorry. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'll handle the riverbed later. I'll finish clearing the tracks first. Actually, no. I quite liked those trees and shrubs over on this side. I'll just move them a bit further back. Maybe add another shrub in about there. Sorry. And lower it. Because you can actually put these objects in the ground and they'll look quite well as a lower shrubbery. But if you turn on F9 mode, then you can see that they're in the ground, obviously, but players usually don't do that. So, maybe move this tree a bit backwards. Maybe down here. This up a bit, like this. Maybe rotate it as well. Kind of like that. Yeah, that looks good. I kind of like how this branch angle kind of matches the up angle of the terrain. So let's do the right side first. I'll move these trees back a bit because I kind of like how the how the curve is obscured when you come at it from this angle. Maybe have one of these autumn shrubs in front. Maybe a small one if there is one. And yes, I know that I'm getting a bit sidetracked, but that happens a lot. You're working on one thing and then you find this area where a very specific thing would look really good, and then you kind of get sidetracked a bit. But that's okay, we've got plenty of time. Okay. Looks good. Now let's continue along here. As I said before, I want this to be kind of kept free. Maybe we could have a few objects placed along like this. Yeah, I think that'll fit well. You can still clearly see the tracks. Move these back. And then as we get into the cutting, there are not going to be any trees or shrubs along the walls, obviously, because, well, it's rock, or it's going to be rock once we paint it. So we need to get rid of those. And there also aren't going to be any trees in the bottom. Maybe some large shrubs, but that will largely depend on if it works with the texture we'll choose. So at this point we kind of need to decide where the rock line is going to be. So how far back we want to delete the trees. I think deleting the taller trees, going a bit further back, will look good, with still keeping the shrubbery a bit further to the front. Because they don't need, the shrubs don't need as much soil for their roots to grow, because they're not as big. So let's see. Oh. Okay, with this kind of coming down along here. Okay. And then we're into the valley. Now let's do the other side. Yeah, we need a few more shrubs along here, along this edge. Because over here, the edge of where the rock starts is quite clearly defined already. So maybe even a tree here. Yeah, I think that looks okay. Just adding a few more different colors of shrubbery in here to kind of break it up. Maybe also a bit more up here. You can also move these down here, which can create a good effect. Sorry. Oh, I've just realized the camera's gone very dark. So time to turn on the light. Let's see how that is. Ah yes, that's much better. Sorry. Okay, so this looks fine for now. We can do a bit more tweaking later. I'll just add another shrub here, just because it looks a bit barren without one. Okay, maybe there's a bit close. We can handle that later. So now I'll just add the forest texture first, and then we'll handle the river section. So with this I'm kind of keeping to the tree line. Maybe going a bit backwards, a bit forwards, depending on how thick I'm imagining the underbrush is at that area. And I'm trying to keep a little strip of grass beside the tracks, so that when I add the ballast to the tracks, you can still see a bit of grass between, basically. Okay, let's see over here. I'm imagining the tree line's probably going to be up here somewhere. Okay, now let's remove the trees here and see how that looks. Actually, no, what you can do in these cases, pardon me, is just select an empty bit of ground with objects selected, and then paste that over areas where there are objects, and then that'll just get rid of them. It's like an eraser, basically, which is a tool that would be quite useful in Trainz, but that's never been added. I mean, it's kind of been added in this workaround, but it's never really been added as that. So if we look at it from down here, we imagine kind of a riverbed over here with maybe some rocks, then I think that looks quite good. Although we do need to make sure the riverbed goes along this way, so that we can clearly see the depression from where the tracks are. Sorry. This is still a bit in the way. Lower this down a bit, perhaps. I think that's good enough, probably. Maybe add a few more trees over here to kind of, maybe not that one, to make it more clear that there's a curve in the river that it's disappearing behind. Then we need to paint underneath this as well. Then let's fill in this area here. Pardon me. Okay. So with this it's a bit trickier because the trees are very close to the tracks. So it's a bit tricky to keep the strip of green while also keeping the forest texture underneath. And I'm maybe going to try to keep the texture a bit back to where the trees are actually at, so that it's more clear that where the shrubs are is a bit lighter area, where the it's not that heavily forested, it's kind of a fringe area. 1 second. Okay. A bit close. No, it's fine. Actually, I work from the other side. Pardon me. Because a thing you've probably noticed is that from this angle, the forest looks very lush and vibrant. Well, maybe not lush because it's autumny, but still very vibrant colors. But if you look at it from this angle, it looks very shadowy and dark. That's just the way that Trainz 2019 renders things. Now, it would look better if the trees had shadows, but for some reason the shadows don't seem to work at the moment. I've already submitted a support ticket and they haven't been able to work out what's wrong yet. Hopefully it'll get fixed soon. So just keep on adding the ground texture. I think we can get a bit more sort of along here. Yeah, that looks good, but we might need another sort of shrub or something here. Okay, now let's finish getting rid of the trees along this track. Oh. Oh, hello. I will admit, that did startle me a little. But thanks for watching. Yeah, just clearing away some trees. So what we've got so far is only 3 baseboards. So this railroad it's fictional, and it's based sort of around the 50s, 60s, so the sort of transition, well, not sort of early to mid diesel in the USA, and it's based around the East Coast, sort of maybe West Pennsylvania-ish. Yeah, so this is what we have so far. I made a palette to sort of showcase some of the assets that will be used in this route. Pardon me. And yes, I started building further back here, and we'll have a river following along this valley down here. At the moment, I'm just in the middle of clearing away some trees. Thanks! At the moment I'm just in the middle of clearing away some trees here before continuing with painting the terrain. Oh, and by the way, I mentioned this a few moments before you joined, but my trees don't have any shadows, and I don't play Trainz. So yes, I also played a lot of Tame, but I decided to switch to TRS-19 because this route I do plan on making it payware, depending on how good it turns out, and I'd rather make the routes in the newest Trainz versions for that. But you're right, the rendering in Tame does look a lot more vibrant, because even though the forest looks okay from this angle, if I turn it like this, you can see that it looks very dark, and the same with a lot of the other 2D objects. And yes, that is a bit annoying. Also the fact that my trees, for some reason, don't have shadows, even though shadows are turned on. And as you can see, some objects like the bridge do actually have shadows and Trainz. Yeah, they for some reason don't. I've already I've already submitted a ticket. Anyway, yeah, I'll just wait and see what happens with that. Sorry. I'm curious, where are you watching from? Because the time zones. Because I'm in the UK, and I'm kind of streaming at a time that might also be okay for someone in the US, because I think that might be where a large part of the audience who might watch Trainz are from. Watching from the USA. Okay. Good. Then the time I'm streaming isn't that bad, is it? Well, I'm glad. Okay, so, and by the way, this is kind of going to be a dried up riverbed that sort of gradually, once it's finished. So next, I'll do the ballasting. And by the way, I'm using the 5-meter baseboard size because it just allows for more detail. Even though it is a bit more performance intensive, I think it's worth it. Yeah, well, that's good then. Oh, and by the way, all the assets I'm using here are either built in with TRS-19 or available on the download station. This is, well, for one reason, because I do plan on making this route payware, so I don't want to use any payware content in that for obvious reasons. But also so that if people want to use some of the assets I use, they are able to, without having to download things from third-party websites or yeah. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Sorry. I do use some of the jointed rail assets that are built in with TRS-19. Yes, they do have a lot of good content. The problem is that most of it is from their website, which means that if I use it in a route or in a session, and then I want to upload that session to share it with other players, then they would have the hassle of going to their website, downloading the things, and then trying to get it to work that way. And for most players, that's just too much work to do before they even can have a look at the route to see whether it's worth the the effort, basically. So for as much as I would love to use jointed rail content that's from their website, I just really can't. Although with TRS 19, a lot of the jointed rail content is actually built in, so that's nice. Well, if you're using TRS 19. So now let's paint the cliff sides. Let's see. No, it looks too worked. Pardon me. That could work, maybe if the scale's a bit higher. What do you think of that? I'm currently building an American coal route which is fictional. Yes, great. Is it? Thanks. How's your work? How's your route coming along? Yeah, I love building fictional routes because I have tried building real routes in the past, but it just gets boring after a while. Well, I got the track put down. Yeah, well that's good. Are you what was I trying to say? Do you have a lot of experience with building routes in Trainz, or are you a beginner? Okay, yeah. I was asking because a few days ago I started 2 years. Wow. Yeah, I've been playing for, let's see, about 11 or 12 years? Yeah, I've been playing for a long time. As I was saying, a few days ago I started a route building tutorial on tutorial series on YouTube. I'm starting at the very basics. So the first episode is just how to create a new route. But we're getting into some more advanced things a bit later on. I've been playing for 9, but I only started building a bit back. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's good still. You've still got quite a bit of experience, I'd say. I remember when I first started making routes, I had no idea that you could fix the height of track. So when I used to place tracks along the side of hills, it always used to be slanted, like sideways, like that. The day I found out that you can make them fixed height was quite a revelation. Sorry. Okay, right. Oh, there's another area where I need to add rock over here. Yeah, by the way, this route will largely be freight traffic. So at the moment, I'm thinking probably logging mostly, maybe a bit of boxcar traffic or grain hoppers also, but that can change. Okay, that looks okay. So, okay. Now, what's next? Okay, I'll add some splines because, yeah, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but in my experience, it's quite easy to get carried away with splines and just add grasses everywhere, and then the performance takes a huge hit, and then you have to get rid of it again. Oh, My map I find interesting because it's not set in... Sorry. Yes, that is very interesting, because when I started route building, I used to be kind of the same way. I kind of just used basically everything that I thought looked nice. So I had a railway that had American locomotives running on it, side by side by GWR British locomotives, and at the time I honestly didn't really know that much about trains, but now at the moment I'm really enjoying making routes that are set in a specific time and place, but not necessarily real routes, because that kind of gets a bit boring. Sorry. Oh, here's a tip. If you've only started building a while back, is learn some of the keyboard shortcuts that you're using a lot. The only reline I ever made was sorry. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, there's always that thing about recreating the railways that you're near. Yeah. Where I live, we don't really get any freight traffic. It's mostly passenger. Although we do have a heritage steam railway just around the corner from where I live, which is really nice. What was I saying before? I've completely forgotten. Alright, keyboard shortcuts. Yeah, for example, if you're in the splines or objects tab, you can switch to the add tool with the A key, and then if you need to move it, you can press M to switch to the movement tool, or D to delete. And if you know these shortcuts and get used to them, it just speeds up your workflow so much. Yeah, it is good. Okay, well, nice meeting you. Bye. Sorry. Okay, so yeah, I am adding grass back here as well. It's not going to be that visible because it's not right next to the track, but it does give a bit more volume to the forest floor, which makes it feel a lot better, even if it's a bit further away from the tracks like this. I mean, this is still quite close, actually, now looking at it. Okay. So let's see, how does this look? Yeah, I mean, it looks okay. If you take the time to really look into the forest, you can clearly see that there isn't much ground cover, especially with shadows not working properly. But you're not really going to look into the forest that head-on if you're driving a train. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, this stream will be archived on our YouTube channel if you want to watch later, or if you miss one that you want to watch or whatever. Just want to mention that. Okay. And as it turns out, this tree is on the rock, which is not great for this kind of tree, so I'll just move it back a bit. And this won't stay this steep, probably. Sorry, maybe it will, but probably not. It's just because the terrain, the hills, I haven't made obviously in this direction, so yeah, I mean, you know likely what I'm talking about. Okay, well, let's, yeah. Yeah, see, and this is why I usually make a sort of a template whenever I start a new route. I usually make a single baseboard template where I put in sort of the countryside that I want to use in the route, where I choose the assets that I want to use as well. So this includes what track type, what grass textures, what trees, and kind of put the things together to kind of create the feel of the route that I want to make. Because then I can just see how I did things there and keep going with the route that I make. Because sometimes the way you picture things in the beginning isn't how they turn out, and this way you can just saves a lot of time rather than if you start building the route proper and then later on realize that it's not actually turned out the way that you wanted it to. Sorry. I just get a thing in my throat at the moment. Okay. So, yeah. Let's see. Okay. I'm mostly adding this sort of darker, more intense grass texture. It's more denser grass texture where the terrain is a bit steeper, or maybe where water tends to accumulate and flow down, because more moisture is usually a cause for fast grass growth. So kind of around here. Because this area is probably not going to be farmed anyway, although I may add some fields down here like I did in the baseboard before. But not these steep parts. How does that look? Okay, maybe add it a bit closer to the track as well. Okay, so, okay, now let's see if we can get this riverbed looking okay. So, first we need the texture for the actual riverbed, so a kind of a gravelly stone texture. So, actually I'll just search for river. Maybe there is a riverbed texture already installed that looks okay. Bit bright. Not quite what I'm looking for. Maybe this one. This looks quite good. Maybe if the scale's a bit larger and if it's twirled like this. Not sure. Well, we can use it for now, and then if we get a better texture later on, we can just bulk replace it. So, the river flows, well, let's start at the top. The river flows from up here, coming down here, kind of along here, down there. Then when we get here, it should flow along this way and then head into the water. Sorry. So, now, should we use this texture as the normal river bed as well, for if there's water in it as well? I mean, it's logical, and it looks okay. So, okay, we'll stick with this for now. And, okay. Now, this looks okay, I guess. It still doesn't look that great. Maybe if we get some of this darker... need to remove river. If we get some of this darker grass over here as well. Oh yeah, that makes it look better. Let's see. Yeah, that looks better, but maybe some rocks would look quite nice here. So maybe some boulders. Let's see if there's that's how you spell boulder, right? Yes. Yeah, very impressive boulder. Yeah, just makes it look perfect. That was the missing ingredient. Now, let's start. Well, sandstone. Oh, I guess. Well, the thing is, the color of the boulders should match the color of the cliffs because it's made from the same stone, and this doesn't really match, even though it would fit quite well with the riverbed. But this looks much better, much closer. So let's just build up some of this around here. Maybe around this area. You can kind of put these together and then put them in the ground a bit further to kind of create these rock outcroppings or boulders, really. Oh no, the scientific term for this, I believe, is crag. A large mass of rock that's sticking out of the terrain. And kind of along here. How does that look? Yeah, it looks okay. Let's see, maybe another one there. Sorry. Maybe a bit closer to the actual river. Yeah, that's fine. And then we should have a larger sort of rock thing over here. Because it's further away from the tracks, it needs to be a bit larger so that it's going to be registered by the players. So we can stack these on top of each other. And like this, maybe a bit of a rounder one over here. And that's quite a striking shape, so maybe we rotate it like this. Yeah, that looks much better. Maybe another smaller one, kind of in here maybe. And yeah, I mean that looks good. If you've got a camera, if you've got a tracking, actually, yeah, let's do that now. So I'll just add a tracking camera here. If you didn't know, you can do this. You can add either static or tracking cameras, which in Driver, when a train goes by, kind of switches the camera to this angle, and with a static camera it just is static and tracks the train. So from this angle you can clearly, it looks quite good. If you're going along here, looking up that way, it looks okay as well. Maybe just add another boulder, so kind of here in the tree line. Maybe another few boulders actually. Maybe like this. Pardon me. So yeah, that looks okay. And we can do some refining on that later. But for now, let's deal with this junction and the trackside objects. So for this I'm using my own levers, or levers, depending on where you are in the world. I'm using these not cantilevers, what are they called? They're the switches with a stand. Yes, if you're not from America, if it's showing a green light, the lever or lever, that means you're going straight. If it's showing a red light, it means you're diverging. So you can see that it changes depending on how it's set. So let's add that here. Okay. And then let's go grab some signals. No, we don't need the one with the cantilever. This one should be fine. And because this is single track here, I'm just going to place the signals here. Actually, no, that's the wrong one because it needs to be on the other side. Sorry. Let's see, where's the the right hand side one? Maybe it's a bit lower. Actually no, I've got it in a pick list, I think. Is there a right hand side one? There should be. 2 foot. Oh no, left hand side, because yes. Sorry, because I'm in Britain, I think I was still in the mindset that the side the signal is on is usually the left, so I was looking for the right hand side one, even though this is set in America, so I should have been looking for the left hand side one for this other side. So like this. So I'm not going to place a signal on this side, because otherwise, because if I did that, then the trains could become stuck. So if one's coming from this side and the one from this side, then they could block each other. Okay, so that's done. And at the moment the speed limit on this is 35 miles an hour. I'm not sure if this curve is okay for that speed, but maybe not. We can change that later. So I'll just finish adding the taller grass texture along here, and definitely also here, because this is not very well kept, this grass, because it's in the middle of nowhere. So there's going to be quite a bit more tall grass here. And also, of course, along the riverbank. Like this. Down here. And now we've got to figure out what we want to do here exactly. So over here I have some pastures and some agriculture. So I think I'm going to choose agriculture for the other area as well. So let's see. If we put a field, well, things for fields, it should be quite flat, really. So maybe if we could flatten a little area around here a bit more, or rather, I mean, make it the grade where it goes up the hill a bit flatter. So like this perhaps. Of course we need to align the terrain to the tracks again because I accidentally lowered it. And maybe we can fit a field in here. So if we go mostly up to the tracks, if the, nah, you can't go up to the tracks because it's too steep here. So if we go along the edge of the hill, so kind of along here, maybe. This could look quite well. Quite good. See? Oh, didn't mean to do that. Okay, let's quickly fill it in. I think this field fits quite well here. I think the sort of light brown color kind of fits well with the rest of the color palette in this area particularly. Okay, so now let's add some fences. So I have this barbed wire fence here, which I've used before, and I think it fits quite well in this this US landscape. Although I will look at some more reference material between streams. So let's see. Is this fence going to curve around the field itself, or is it going to go all the way up to the tracks and this is just not used, but the farmer actually owns it, so it's going up there? I think it's going to go all the way up to the tracks because if for nothing else, it's going to give more variety to people driving along the route if there's a fence for part of it along the right of way. So if we go along here, kind of down here, and I try not to make these too straight so that it still feels a bit organic. Okay, and I do tend to put quite a bit of detail in my routes. So for example, fields, I always put a fence gate in so that there's actually access to the field. So because when I'm looking at a route, I'm driving, I do pay attention to these details, and although it does take a bit more time to do, I think it's worth it. Sorry. And yes, this might be a British fence gate, I'm not sure. I haven't really seen that much reference material for American fence gates, if there's a difference. Pardon me. If there is a difference, then I'll bulk replace these later. So now I'm just finding the dirt texture that I had underneath from where the tractors go in and out. Where the dirt is a bit more muddied, which is usually the case. Or often the case, I should say. So how does that look from the Trainz perspective? Yeah, that's visible. Sorry. And then this area should have more of the taller grass texture because, well, it's not being used for farmland, so why should the grass be kept lower? There's nothing grazing here. Now how does that look? I mean, It looks a bit flat. Maybe if we added the grass spline here as well. Kind of just crisscross it back and forth. Well, we need to go all the way up to the tracks, because there's no reason why there wouldn't be grass up there if it's not being taken care of, or rather cut, I mean. So how does this look? Yeah, that looks fine. From this side we can more clearly see where the splines are because of the rendering of Trainz in the era. We can see that we do need to add grass all the way down here as well, otherwise the ridge will be very apparent. Pardon me. Okay, and this reminds me, I also need to add a bit of grass splines along these darker areas occasionally, just to kind of create a bit more variety, really, so that it doesn't look as flat. Because in TRS 19 you might have noticed that the terrain textures tend to be quite reflective, so you see this kind of white haze over the terrain texture from this angle, but that's not there from this angle. That's what I mean, the kind of the reflectiveness that the sun reflects off of the grass. So things tend to look a bit more flat, at least if you have the what are they called, the displacement textures turned off, which I have because it just lags too much for me. Sorry. Okay, and with these, with the how I'm putting the grass down, I'm just trying to keep an eye on how the texture kind of flows, where the tall grass is and how it might flow like that. I mean, pardon me, that kind of looks okay. I think it needs a bit more in the corner here, though. Not a track. Yeah, it needs a bit of track in the corner. Yeah. No. Like that. Yeah, that looks okay. So if we go along here. I think we do need a bit more over here. Maybe like that. That looks good. And then a bit more here, and also along the area of what am I saying? A bit more along the riverbank. That's the word I'm looking for. Riverbank. Because even though it's quite far away, it does add a lot if you see it in the distance like this. Yeah, it does add a lot to breaking up the scene. Maybe also add just a bit behind those rocks to kind of keep the illusion of the same level of detail going on back there. Also, should I add grass along the edge of the forest here, or no? I think it looks fine like this. I don't think we need to use the performance on that. Excuse me. And yes, we obviously also need some long grass in this area. Now how does that look? Looks good. Sorry. So, I think we'll leave this area down here by the road as it is for now, and then revisit it when we do the other side of the valley, because how that looks can affect this, because we might want to have fields here or houses depending on what that other area looks like. So instead, let's continue along this way and see what it and let's build the valley going back here. So just add, let's see, the valley's coming along here this way. I'm just going to the map view to see which way's north. That way's north. Okay, so it's kind of coming from down here, going along, curving up. Pardon me. So if the bottom track continues going along this valley down here maybe, then the top one could maybe lean sort of northwest-ish, because maybe the two could meet up again at some point. Okay, so let's add another baseboard here to the north, and then I'll update those both to be 5 meters. Oh, and in case you're wondering why I'm placing baseboards in the 10-meter grid size first and then updating them to the 5 meters after I've placed them, that's just because when I was using Tane, I think last year or the year before maybe, I ran into a bug. One second. I ran into a bug. It only happened once, but I placed a baseboard in the 5-meter grid size. I saved, I quit Trainz, I loaded up again, and all the terrain was gone. The trees were still there, and the tracks and splines, everything, but the textures were gone. Essentially, I could just see the skybox at the bottom, the light blue skybox, through where the terrain should be. So I got in contact with the Trainz support team, and as it turned out, they had never encountered that issue either. And after a lot of back and forth, they said I should try to update the tiles back to 10 meters and then update them to 5 meters, which I did do, and that ended up fixing things. So since then, I've always added tiles in the 10-meter grid size first, and then updated it to use the 5-meter grid size afterwards. Sorry. Now I don't think that this is a very prominent bug, because in all my years of using Trainz, I've only ever, placing the wrong track, I've just noticed. In all of the years of using Trainz, I've only ever run into this issue once, and yeah, you're probably not going to run into it, but you might, and so yeah, that's why I'm just being cautious, really, more than anything. Yeah, so with that out of the way, I'm placing the track along the valley, which is a bit difficult because this particular track, the lodding, the level of detail, as you can see, cuts off quite soon, so I can't really see the curve of the track in its entirety. I think that's a bit too steep for what I want. I want this to go over here and then probably along here, and then maybe go a bit steeper, maybe 1.5%. Sorry. And then kind of start maybe going a bit more northwest. So kind of start making a gentle curve going along here, like that. Yeah, that looks okay. And then let's start making the terrain around this, the valley terrain, because the way I'm picturing this is that the track is going up the side of the valley, so that if you're looking this way, you're going to have this amazing view of the valley curving away to the side, to the mountains. So let's see. Okay. Actually, no, I'm going to use the height up tool for this, because with the height up tool you can do a lot more smooth curves than if you're using the plateau or set height tool first. Now, if you've already got a higher elevation, that's obviously more useful, sorry, and more time efficient, but in this case I'm just going to use the height up tool. He says using the plateau tool. No, for this bit I'm going to use the height up tool to kind of just get a feel what this area might feel like. And yeah, this is again where this particular track is kind of difficult to use. Maybe I should use a different track when I'm making the terrain, and then replace it using a bulk replace asset tool later. Pardon me. Yeah, that might be a good idea for future projects, but for this it's already under the way. Now this is a bit of a tricky area when you've got this already made terrain one side, but you kind of need to align the other terrain. You want to do it without changing what you've already made. A bit tricky sometimes. Let's see. Okay, so this is the base height for the valley. So with kind of now that I've kind of got the feeling of what it looks like, I can flatten to this height over here. And this is about as much as we've climbed in that space. That's not very far. I think I'll increase the gradient. Just a little, not much. So if I go to maybe 1.7 and then update the gradient here. I know I've only been using 1% for this bit. It should already start becoming a lot steeper, a lot higher. No, that's not the right one. This way. Yes, it's much higher. Well, I say that. It is quite a bit higher than it was before. So now let's just build up this hillside over here, or mountainside, as it was. And kind of just get it to the height of the tracks on this side. Let's see. So yeah, this process can take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of finagling to work right, but if you get all of these bumps, all of these little valleys and bumps worked out, and you get a smooth slope, it can look really good. So let's see. Okay, let's keep the slope going all the way to the edge, so we can see kind of how high the mountain already is at the edge of what we can see at the moment. It's a bit too steep maybe. But that's mainly what I use the plateau tool for smoothing, because for example, well, one second, I'll just fill this area in back here a little more, and then we'll get to the example. Because I do want to kind of make the mountains get higher the further we go along. Okay, so now let's get to the example. So as you can see here, there are all these sorry, there are all these little bumps and divots in the terrain. So if I now choose the plateau tool with the sensitivity radius all the way up, and then kind of just click and drag, well, not really drag, just click and hold for a few seconds here, you can see that it kind of smooths out the slope. And yeah, this is what I mostly use the plateau tool for. Although it is still a bit tricky to get a smooth slope. This is kind of where I'd really appreciate an actual smooth tool in Trainz, but there has never been added one, and I kind of doubt that they will, although they are doing some big changes to the surveyor tools in the new Trainz Plus thing that they're working on, I think. Not too sure. They are working on a multiplayer surveyor though, which I think can both be a very good creative tool, but there's also a lot of potential for shenanigans there. Just imagine a couple of people, just you and your friends, just building on a route at the same time. One person's building a route that goes into the mountains, while the other one builds a route that goes kind of more along the plains, and then they accidentally intersect if they're not communicating right. Yeah. And then trying to make that work. I mean, you'd probably end up with a situation like with a lot of the mountains in sort of southern Africa. I think it's southern Africa where the mountains are. I'm not sure, but in Africa, somewhere in Africa, there are mountains that go straight into the plains, and it's actually really surreal to look at in photos. I've never been there, but if you look at it in photos, it actually looks really surreal. Sorry, to see this flat plain stretching out in front of you, and then just having this huge mountain coming seemingly out of nowhere. Yeah, looks very interesting, very surreal, like I said before. So this looks okay. It's not perfect, and to be honest, you could fiddle around with this terrain for hours and not get it looking exactly like you want, but for now it's good enough. Sorry. So now let's start working on the other side of this little valley. I'm just going to fill this area in to bring it up to the height. Oh, I've just realized I've never painted this area with a forest texture. Just need to quickly fix that little mistake. Sorry. Okay, mistake fixed. So as I was saying before, I'm just bringing this up to the height of the valley, so then I can add the other slope. I wish that you could also zoom out further in Trainz, because this is as far as you can zoom out. Usually this is fine, but if you're doing large-scale terraforming, like with mountains, it would be really useful if you would zoom out further. But if I zoom out further, you can see it already tilts me to go back into the map view. I always feel like I just need to get a bit further back to really get the big picture and be able to work on the terrain better, but they haven't made that a thing. And the thing is, I don't really know why they put that limit there where it is. Sorry. Because if you put the 3D cursor, the compass up on a mountain, then there's no problem in looking further. You can clearly see the assets. For example, now I'm zoomed out much further than if the camera is down here. So it just feels like an arbitrary value they put in. Yeah. So now if the valley comes from here, okay, well let's just grab this height. Sorry. And smooth out this height to get a smooth edge to then work on with the height up tool. So if we made this valley go along like this, it's quite narrow. Huh. Now the thing is, do I want this to be wider here? Sorry if you can hear those motorcycles outside. Yeah, and I'm just thinking, do I want this to be wider here, or do I want the valley to become wider when the track curves around to face more sort of northwest? Pardon me, just need a bit of water. I think I wanted to get wider a bit later. So, yeah, I'll just add the wall, increase the height a bit. And we can't really make this slope too high at the moment, because there isn't enough terrain to build it up that high. And if we add another baseboard here, then yes, we would have space, but then we'd also need to do all the terraforming here, because otherwise you'd be able to see the edge of the baseboard if you look up this way. So that's why I kind of want to avoid putting a baseboard here, because it's, yeah. Okay, so let's just build this up. Okay, now I'll use the plateau tool to kind of create the slope a bit more and to make a smooth slope. Pardon me. So one thing that I found when you're making a valley that you really don't want is kind of this flat bottom to it, unless you want to put a river in or something like that. But usually these valleys don't really have a flat bottom. The point where one slope ends is usually the one where the other one begins. So yeah, just bearing that in mind while I'm making these slopes. Now let's see, how does this look if we're coming out from the cut? Because it is worthwhile to get down and look at the perspective. So if we come around here, then we open up into this valley. Yeah, I quite like that. Quite like how that looks. Okay, see. And yes, I am smoothing the peaks a bit as well, so that it looks, because from this angle it looks more like the peak is a bit round and it goes over the other side. If it was a sharper peak, then then it would be more obvious that the world ends here. Yes. Also, that's a thing. I don't know if you remember this, but in previous Trainz versions, the edge of a baseboard used to be kind of this this kind of table edge, like you might find on a model railway. Because if you didn't know this, Trainz was originally meant to be a model railway simulator. But then in, I think it was Trainz a New Era, they changed it so that it's no longer this table side, but rather this actual soil and rock side. So there's definitely a change from the focus of what Trainz is actually supposed to be. Also, they renamed, because the easy driving mode in Trainz used to be called DCC mode as opposed to cab mode. So they've renamed those to easy mode and realistic mode now. Sorry, pardon me. Yeah. So I think that these valley sides look good now. So now let's just change the height of the terrain, align the terrain to the tracks to see where we need to flatten it a bit, because I don't really like these high cuts in the side here because I want the player to be able to turn the camera to look at the valley, but at the moment if they try to turn the camera it just gets stuck and turned down like that. So what we need to do is we need to create a bit more room for the player to move the camera around. So just move this over here. And this also isn't that unrealistic because, sorry. It isn't that unrealistic because in real life you could just say that it's against landfall. So they've made more space here because this area might be prone to landfall because there are, for example, limestone layers that are lighter being crushed between granite layers. I'm not sure if this makes geological sense, but you could explain it away like that. But now that we've moved it back, we also need to smooth this area again because now the edge has become quite steep. So kind of just up here a bit, down there. And what I also don't want is for the ground to go up and then down to the tracks here. So I'll just move it down. I'd rather it fill a bit up to the track, where the track is, rather than going up and then going back down. Sorry. And yeah, this looks okay. I mean, it does still need a little bit of work to kind of get this straight edge out, but it looks okay for now. And I've just seen that that's all we have time for today. So I hope you've enjoyed the stream. It's been a lot of fun for me. And if you're interested, this live stream is going to be archived on our YouTube channel, so that's Sharadice channel, like the same name that the Twitch channel is. And yes, the next stream will be at the same time on Thursday. So I hope that you've enjoyed, and there's OBS, and good night or good morning or wherever you are.